We all have that inner voice or an inner saboteur, as I say. I write in my book, mine's named Jiminy Cricket. He can be good or he can be bad, right? Like he sits on one shoulder and reinforces my good behavior, but he also can give me lots of insecurities and self-doubt.
It is Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm your host, Russell Lolliker, as per usual. I'm a communications and leadership expert, a couple of decades of experience in both those areas, and a whole heap of curiosity, just like you, on how we can make the workplace a better place. Authenticity is our topic this week. Jim Fielding being the author of this. Well, he's got a book and he's sort of, I guess, been the author of these episodes. Monday through Thursday, we're going to be digging into authentic leadership. Jim Fielding will be sharing his insights throughout. Authentic's a funny thing because sometimes we don't know if people are being their true selves at work, and you'll see humanity brought up a lot in conversations around authentic leadership. Are we being our full selves? Are we bringing our humanity into the workplace? I think it's a great connection to make because authentic on its own, does it really mean that much until we connect it to how it makes us feel and the value of it? And I think Jim does a great job of doing that throughout the week. So I look forward to sharing this latest excerpt. It's about our relationship with ourselves and how that works when it comes to authentic leadership. So hold on for that. Glad you brought up hiring. I'm going to get back to that in a second.
Yeah.
But I'm thrilled that we sort of set the table on what authenticity is and isn't. Now I want to move into understanding ourselves better. So one of the biggest pieces of relationships at work is our relationships with ourselves. So
Oh gosh, yes.
What would you say are some of the internal barriers we put in front of ourselves to prevent us from being truly authentic?
Well, I mean, listen, we all have that inner voice or an inner saboteur, as I say. I write in my book, mine's named Jiminy Cricket. He can be good or he can be bad, right? Like he sits on one shoulder and reinforces my good behavior, but he also can give me lots of insecurities and self-doubt. And so I think a lot of it is going through some of that work younger in your career to really understand there's so many tools now that you can, personality tests, assessments, where you can really dive in and look at yourself and say, what am I good at and what am I not good at? What do I like to do and what do I not like to do? And by the way, again, we all have that story. We're all human beings. We all have strengths. We all have developmental opportunities. We all have outright weaknesses. And I think, a lot of the tools that I've used, DISC and Myers-Briggs and 16 personalities, not only does it show your quote normal personality or your normal traits, it shows how you react under stress. And I think that was really interesting for me because I changed a lot under stress. And I tended to be not a very good manager under stress. And I wore my stress on my face like I could never play poker. And that was a huge insight for me earlier in my career, is that by nature, being in retail and media and entertainment, they're stressful industries. You're dealing with deadlines, you're dealing with changes in the marketplace. And I had to learn how to kind of be a sponge on that stress and maintain calm and maintain professionalism. Because what I learned in my leadership style, I could swing an entire team's mood just by my mood. And I only learned that by going through some of this work and going and doing some of these assessments and getting the feedback. I also think one of the tools I used, and I know a lot of your listeners use it, I did a 360 review and more than once. And for those of you who don't know, a 360 review means you ask people that work for you, people that you work for, peers, and even people in your family life to answer a survey about yourself. It's all anonymous. You can tell like what their relationship is. Well, peer, it depends on how many you ask, right? If you only ask one family member, you're going to know what family members say. But I always tried to ask a pretty big pool. That probably was the most illuminating. And again, that was at Disney. I did a couple 360 reviews and I definitely changed my style after that 360 review. So there are, especially these day and age with tech advancements. There's plenty of tools, free tools you can take online to like even learn about yourself. But I felt like the 360 review was probably one of the biggest tools for me.
So I'm hearing one of the biggest superpowers I talk about for leaders is their self-awareness. You have to start there. You
For
have to
sure.
start there. So how is self-awareness key in that? Because I mean, knowing yourself is great. These tools are fantastic, but it's also a matter of understanding like how you grew up, your socioeconomic
Yeah.
situation. And I like tools. I've taken quite a few myself,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't provide a lot of context. It provides a
Mm.
lot of, here's a word, you're courageous because you fit within the 79 words
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
provide, which is
Yeah.
helpful and informative, but it's not personalized as much as you think. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about authenticity, I feel like we need to get a little bit more personal. I guess where I want to sort of move that is you talked earlier about degrees of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So if we better understand ourselves, which is great and really important to do, how do we know which degree we're showing up? Going, you know what? I am too much in these certain situations. Wow, I fly off the handle real easily in these situations.
Mm-hmm. I
So
pop, right?
how do we know where the flags are, the beige, the green, and the red ones, so we can adjust in the workplace for ourselves?
Yeah, no. I think you're basically doing a commercial for executive coaching and in some cases therapy. But I think if people do not have the ability or the means to access, personal like therapy, psychology, or executive coaching, which are two very different things, by the way, I think part of it is then being able to make mistakes and try some things like test and roll and then own it enough to say that you're testing and rolling. So for me, for example, I grew up with childhood trauma. I mean, I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. I grew up with an alcoholic home. My mom was an alcoholic, functioning alcoholic, but alcoholic. I suffered with, my sexuality and accepting myself as a gay man. So I had to work through that trauma, to your point, that childhood trauma, because some of my reactions, to your point of context, was because I was the adult child of an alcoholic and I was used to being a control freak because I was in a situation where sometimes my home life was not in control. And I became hyper controlling because at a very young age, I was helping my mom a lot and trying to keep stuff together. And so I learned that through therapy and also, frankly, going to Al Anon, right? So I needed to go get some outside help to understand that because, to your point, that was the context. Now, that's one of the things that I was asked when I was interviewing for a job, or I tell people to ask for interviewing for a job, are mental health services included in your benefits? Many companies have where you get 10 sessions for $20 copay or something. I accessed that my entire career. Like I went to therapy for a long time. I had an executive coach at Disney. That was an incredible benefit for me. I think that's why I went into executive coaching myself. But I think what you're talking about is very personal and is a journey to understanding yourself. I was a journaler. I went back and read journals from when I had kept my journals the whole time. I went back to understand myself better because I had forgotten some of that stuff. And I also luckily, I have an incredible sibling relationship. I have one sister, a younger sister, who is a truth teller. She's probably the most direct person in my life who frankly calls me on my BS. And, like my favorite phrases where you wake up, Russell, is like when somebody in your personal life, like a spouse or a partner, your sister says, I don't work for you. Stop managing me. And you're like, whoa, that to me hit me with a wet towel, right? I mean, slap me hard. And she would say to me, you're not being real right now. You're not really, you're playing a role. Like and she calls me, my dad's name was Jim. So to her and my nieces, I'm Jimmy, right? And she's like, I want Jimmy right now. I don't want Disney Jim. I don't want DreamWorks Jim. I want Jimmy. So I say to people, and I know you know this concept, I say, form your board of directors, your board of advisors early in your career and have people who are going to advise you, beyond mentoring. Like, I think there's roles on a board of advisors, just like when you build a corporate board of directors when you're a CEO, right? And that truth teller is one of the roles on the board of advisors. And, for me, it happened to be my sister. and happens to be my sister, she still cries BS on me.
It's so important to have that circle of friends and a network, and I don't think enough people do, or they think it's
Mm-mm,
people at work that have to be that when it could be
mm-mm.
anybody and everybody. You just need to
Yeah,
have a connection. It's about relationships to
it
benefit
is.
yourself.
It is. And I think when people get too formal about it, Russell, and they
Mm,
say, oh, I need to get a mentor or I need to build a network, and they make it again very performative and like a to-do list, it's like it's kind of got to happen naturally. But my advice to your point is do it earlier in your career. I probably did it a little bit later. And my I had a great peer mentor who was somebody at my same level, and I still have a peer mentor who was outside my industry, right? But did my same role, but outside of retail and media,
right,
right?
right.
And so I think that's really important too, because sometimes they have to be outside your company. They have to be sometimes outside your industry, because otherwise you kind of get into that echo chamber, right? And it's basically like a feedback loop that's not really as honest as it could be. But I had mentors my entire career, but I tell people this all the time, it's the mentee's job to have a productive mentor relationship. It is not the mentor's relationship to make it productive. It is the mentee's job to make it productive. So,
Can authenticity change? Our definition of
mm,
authenticity change throughout it? Because as you said,
yeah.
started early. There's a lot of challenges and trauma that you overcame. So what
Mm-hmm.
you thought was authentic before may have changed with that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Mm, for sure. Not to get into the book, but I started my career in the closet. I went to work in the 80s. Like people were not out at work in the 80s for the young listeners to your podcast. I spent the first almost 4 years of my career in the closet, living a double life. I was not living authentic, but I was being safe. I brought up that word earlier because it was not an environment that I could live as an out gay man. And I made the choice to leave that company and go to another company because I was ready to embrace my story more and to live as an out gay man. So to your point, my authenticity changed. My story didn't change. Like it was still the same story, but again, that degrees of authenticity, it changes. And I also think the old adage, as you get older, you get wiser, is true, right? You learn new things. You learn new skills. You learn what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like, what you don't like. There's new tools. Before we started this, you and I were talking about AI and all these new things that are coming on, right? I I think anybody listening to this that ever worked for me, if they knew that I was spending 5, 6, 10 hours a week on graphic design, they'd laugh because I'm not a graphic designer, but now I need to be. So I think it changes. Your story changes, your authenticity changes. What doesn't change in my mind is your commitment to authenticity.
Love that. Love that. Look at that little. I almost wanted to give you a space at the end of that, just go like period, done. Like so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. That's Jim Fielding wrapping up our second of our 4-part conversation on authentic leadership. This is Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm your host, Russell Lolliker. Thank you so much for prioritizing your own leadership journey and spending some time with us. We have a great piece of content. I guess I hate the way to say that, but a compliment to this show is the Raw Note newsletter that comes out every single Thursday. If you're interested, it's got insights from our guests. It also has some sneak peeks of what guests are coming up and some of the topics we're going to talk about as well. And this is the key piece of the newsletter. I share some of my own insights and reflections on leadership. I recently did one about the problem with people leaders. I know it's going to ruffle a few feathers, but coming from the world of communication, it is an interesting thing to say because it communicates a lot that we may not actually be aware of. Anyway, if you're interested, go to russelllolliker.com or relationshipsatworkshow.com and you'll see ability to sign up on the top for free, and it'll be in your inbox every single week. All right, I'll leave it there and talk to you again soon. Take care.